Good afternoon, everybody. This is Roger Durling, Executive Director of the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, and welcome to the Writers Panel of this year, 2021. And it's my pleasure to thank our presenting sponsor, UGG, and also a special thank you to the Film Festival Board of Directors and our president, Linda Wyman. This year, the first time ever that we have the 10 nominees for Best Screenplay, Adapted and Original. We've had a full panel before, but we've never had in our history had the 10 nominees. And speaking of 10, please welcome our moderator, Ann Thompson, who is the editor at large of IndieWire, who's been with us doing this panel for 10 years, and our panelists, Aaron Sorkin, The Trial of the Chicago Seven, Chloe Chow, Nomadland, Darius Martyr, Sound of Metal, Emerald Fennell, Promising Young Woman, Florian Zeller, The Father, Kemp Powers, Soul, Kenny and Keith Lucas, Judas and the Black Messiah, Lee Isaac Chung, Minari, Peter Bainum, Borat subsequent movie film, and Ramin Barani, The White Tiger. Take it away, Anne.
Hey all, thank you, Roger. Welcome back to my favorite panel of the year, where we get to hear from the most lauded and gifted screenwriters of the year. And amazingly, all 10, as Roger said. So welcome everybody. We have 4 auteurs who wrote and directed original films that earned at least 5 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, including 2 making their feature film debuts, Emerald Fennell, Me Too, revenge thriller, Promising Young Woman, Darius Martyr, and who is the hearing loss drama, Sound of Metal, Lee Isaac Chung, rural family autofiction Minari, and Oscar winner Aaron Sorkin, who brings to life the clash between police and demonstrators that lead to the real-life 1969 courtroom drama, The Trial of the Chicago Seven. And Aaron, welcome back to this panel. You've been here before.
I have. Good to be here, Anne.
Yep. Also in that Chicago courtroom was Black Panther Fred Hampton, whose story is told in Judas and the Black Messiah, written by director Shaka King Wilburson, and the duo here with us, Keith and Kenny Lucas. Judas is up for 6 Oscars, including Best Picture. And also part of a writing team is 2-time Oscar nominee Peter Bainum, who returned to the character of Borat with Sacha Baron Cohen after 14 years with Borat's subsequent movie film, and this is his 2nd Oscar nomination. And we have also Chloe Chow, who adapted Jessica Bruder's nonfiction book about America's roaming road warriors. Ramin Barani adapted his college friend Aravind Adiga's 2008 Rags to Riches novel, White Tiger. We have 2 playwright turned screenwriters who adapted their own plays. Kemp Powers' One Night in Miami, which recreates the meeting of friends Malcolm X, Cassius Clay, Jim Brown, and Sam Cooke, and in a 1962 hotel room in Miami. And we have Florian Zeller, who adapted with Christopher Hampton the popular father-daughter stage play The Father, which Zeller also directed, which is also up for 6 Oscars, including Best Picture. So thank you all for being here. I want each of you to give us a short resume of how you became a screenwriter, followed by the very, very first nugget of inspiration for your movie. And I mean almost like the first scene of it, like the thing you imagined, and is it in the final film? And I'm going to start with Emerald, and if you could go give us your brief screenwriter resume.
Okay, no pressure. So I started out, I guess I started out as an actress and novelist. So I wrote 3 books, and then I started writing in TV in England, and I was the executive producer and head writer on Killing Eve series 2. And then I made Promising Young Woman, which I wrote in 2018. And the first thing that came to me was a scene that is in the film, which is the scene of a young woman lying on a bed, incredibly drunk, being undressed, asking drunkenly, "What are you doing?" And then suddenly sitting up sober and saying,
Which is definitely in the final film. Darius, how about you?
Hi. Well, I started screenwriting a long time ago. It took me a long time to get to the place where anyone noticed. So I started maybe in my late teens, early 20s. I was always writing, but I came from a very critical artistic family, and breaking through that was, I'm kind of the first person to share something of a family of artists generations. So I remember sharing a short screenplay with someone in my early 20s, and she didn't like it. And I remember I didn't write again for another 10 years. And I just took it so hard. I looked at it 10 years later and I thought, shit, this was great. I never made it. And I was reminded of that recently, of just how hard this journey is for some anyway. For me, it was hard to really commit to writing and getting to it. And then I finally committed myself to writing every day about 16 years ago, where I stopped editing, I stopped doing other things that were in the way of writing. And then I came to Place Beyond the Pines, which I worked on with Derek C. in France. He and I have also adapted. We started adapting a massive story called Empire of the Summer Moon together. And then this story actually came up in my relationship to Derek C. in France. And the very first thing I saw was a doc he was shooting of a metal band called Jucifer. And Jucifer is made up of a man and a woman who are in relationship, who travel endlessly on the big American road. And it just struck me, the picture of a codependent relationship as playing out through sound on a stage really hit me hard, and it's in the movie.
Thank you. And Lee, how about you?
Yeah, I
Anything?
started off really as a writer director for, I guess, since like 2005, 2006. It was about 2013 that I decided I would blow things up a little bit and spend more time maybe doing the dedicated writing that Darius was mentioning. I had been doing a lot more improvisatory types of films. And I felt a little dissatisfied near the end of coming to that process. And with Minari, I just started to really try to refine and understand what it means to write and to figure out how stories work and all that stuff. And I wrote a lot of bad scripts those years. I was trying to figure things out. And then Minari, I wrote in 2018. It started off, I had this image in mind of this family showing up at a trailer home and there are no stairs. And so everybody has a different way of getting into the house. So that was the first image I had.
Well,
Definitely, definitely in the movie.
Yeah.
Aaron, you did lots of things before screenwriting, but go ahead.
well, just I wanted to be a playwright. That's I love movies as much as anyone, but I didn't think it was something I could write because I have no visual sensibility at all. And even today, I mean, I'm a kind of a playwright faking his way through movies. I remember back then, in my early 20s, I'd read a quote from Sylvester Stallone where he said that the ideal screenplay would have no words in it, and I thought that's not for me. Um, uh, but the first play I wrote, I also love courtroom dramas. I grew up on courtroom dramas, love courtroom dramas. And the first play I wrote was a military courtroom drama, A Few Good Men. And the next thing I knew, I was being shipped out to LA to adapt it into a screenplay. And when I wrote that screenplay, not only had I never written a screenplay, I'd never read a screenplay. So what I did was I got a bunch of screenplays, the screenplays for just some movies that I loved, and would watch the movie with the screenplay on my lap, just kind of seeing, okay, here's what it looked like on the page, and here's how that happened. And like I said, I still sort of fake my way through it. I definitely do not write screenplays that Sylvester Stallone would approve of. But that's how it happened. By adapting my own play, that's how I got into screenwriting.
And was there a nugget in? I know you basically Spielberg pitched it to you, but was there a sort of nugget scene for the trial of the Chicago 7 once you started to think about it?
Yeah, it was the first scene, and it was when I realized, and I know I came to this kind of late, but when I realized early in the research that the 8 members of the Chicago 7 were not all the same person, that they were very different stripes. And I thought, well, I should introduce them that way, showing how different they were. So the prologue that you see in the film is the first thing that kind of came to me, I think. It's,
cool.
As you know, it's a long time.
10 years, as I recall, yes.
14.
So Keith and Kenny, sorry, Keith and Kenny, what was the beginning of your screenwriting drama?
Well, we started as, well, we are stand-up comedians. We got into the business in 2010. Yep. We had aspirations of being philosophers, but that didn't work out. They don't make any money. They make no money. And so we got into stand-up. We wrote a bunch of, like, we had an animated series that was lowly watched. Nobody watched it. No one watched it. It was called Lucas Rosie. And then we had a sketch show that even less people watched. Nobody watched. It's called Friends of the People. And it was fun. We loved jokes. The first time we came across Fred Hampton, though, was in college. We were taking an African American studies course. We read about his story, and we were really, like, enthralled by it. Yep. And I would say the first nugget of a scene that we came up with was the church scene. I mean, that's the first one we saw. And we wanted to start with Fred giving a speech at a church, but Shaka wisely moved it to a better portion of the movie. But yeah, that's the first thing.
You definitely built up to it. Peter, so you guys were 14 years separated from the first Borat. How did you get back into, but give us the screenwriting story first. Yes.
The screenwriting story is a bit weird because I took a bizarre wrong turn and joined the British Merchant Navy when I was 16. And anyone who knows me is completely stunned to hear that, because if I was still there, I definitely would have been responsible for that ship that blocked the Suez Canal last week. I'm an idiot. I can't drive a car. My wife just says driving's not for you. I don't know why anyone let me in there. Anyway, that was a strange wrong turn. I mean, I only say that to say I had no writing as a kid. No, I was a fan of things like Monty Python and comedy shows and movies, but I just didn't know anyone or ever heard of the idea of writing movies, even though I could see the credits at the end of them. So, but then I had I eventually was wisely thrown out of the Merchant Navy and went to London and just started off with things like radio writing. I just landed somehow. I tried a bit of stand-up comedy, which also wasn't for me. And I started out writing satirical sketches in radio, and that's a sort of well-trodden path in the UK that people start off in radio, and then wrote for TV. Wrote with Steve Coogan, this character called Alan Partridge in the UK. And then eventually Sasha called me up in 2005 and said, do you want to come out? And I'm doing this movie, Borat. And I tried various screenplays and nothing had ever gone anywhere. But I think I learned a lot from those failed screenplays for sure. But then I came to LA and worked on the Borat movie and sort of took it from there. And then to the second question of, what brought us to do this one? I think we spent 14 years actually saying no. No, it's scary, it's dangerous, we've had a success with the first movie, and we just felt like, whenever people would say, you've got to do another one. But I suspected they'd be the first people to say, why did you do that if and when it failed miserably, or Sasha was killed, or whatever, that there would be, and it was just a sort of slightly, we didn't. And then I think we just, I don't know, there was a specific scene that we were thinking of. And also, I have to say as well that I was not there for the very beginning of the inception of the first movie. Sasha and my colleagues Ant Hines and Dan Swimer and Nina Bertrand, they basically sat down. I think he'd done an appearance on Kimmel during the midterm elections, Borat had. And they came in, and I think everyone was just feeling at this time, one word, Trump. And it just felt like a dark, dark time. And obviously there were many dark years to come after that. But I think it was like, this is the reason. This is the reason you have to, and when I came on board, it became, we have to do this. And then it was a small problem of the other insurmountable problems of making the movie, which were quite a lot.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, anyway.
We'll get into that more later. Okay.
Yeah.
Chloe, so you adapted Jessica Bruder's nonfiction book, but tell me how you first got into screenwriting.
I think I started writing stories on the internet for anybody who wants to see them. And I drew a lot of manga growing up. Didn't really have any professional background at all. And then when I went to grad school at NYU, I was trained as a writer-director, and that's how it naturally happened. For me, when I read Jessica Bruder's book, her chapter on Empire, Nevada, which is a company town that shut down after the factory shut down, and in 6 months, even the zip code disappeared. That was very striking to me. So I drove to that town, and I got into one of those empty houses, and I walked out onto the backyard, the same house I ended up shooting in. I kind of turned around and looked at my partner and said, I think we have a movie, and that's how it's going to end. And that's kind of how I backtracked the movie from that moment.
Wow. Ramin, you tell us about your screenwriting journey.
I started writing scripts maybe 20 some years ago, but my life started almost same time as Isaac. It's good to see you, Isaac. We were in New Directors, New Films together a long time ago. Yeah. You had Munir and Gabo there, which I loved.
Yeah.
And yeah. So just been I think this was my 7th film that wrote and directed. And I was drawn to it because my friend wrote the novel. We've been friends since college. And I've been reading rough drafts of The White Tiger for about 4 years before it was published. And I think one of the first scenes that I thought about is this scene where this servant is driving his 2 well-intentioned liberal masters, and he tricks them into thinking that when he touches his head that he's noticing something very holy from the Bodhgaya or from Buddha out the window, and he gets them to do the same thing and is quietly mocking them. And it's a scene very early in the novel, because the novel is not told in order. It comes quite late in the film, but it did make it into the film, which I'm happy about.
Excellent. So Kemp, you started as a playwright also.
Actually, I started as a journalist for 2 decades. So yeah, that was my first career. And One Night in Miami was actually my first play that was produced back in 2013. And, I was honestly just hoping to maybe have like a sustaining career as a playwright. But I think, as everyone knows, there's no working playwright today who isn't also writing for film and television or teaching at a university. And the thought of teaching makes me want to puke. So I figured I better learn how to write for film and television so that I can sustain myself. So my first TV gig was on Star Trek Discovery. And I eventually, when I got to a point where I felt comfortable enough with my screenwriting skills, I decided to take a stab at adapting One Night in Miami into a film myself. And when I wrote the first draft, I fully intended some other writer to rewrite me later. But when Regina King came on as director, the work really connected with her, and she insisted that I stay on as the only writer. And that's when I became an executive producer and got a chance to see that script home to the finish line. And the second part of your question, yeah, I mean, obviously it was based on a real night, February 25th, 1964. It was a passage that I read in a book back in the early aughts about intersection between sports and the civil rights movement. At the time that I found out it was a real night, I initially planned on writing a book about it, about the friendship between those four men, because I was still a journalist at the time. It was a book I never got around to writing. And I think the first scene really that I came up with, it came from a conversation I was having with a friend of mine. He was telling me something about how Lincoln Perry, the guy who was Step and Fetch It, was like one of the first black millionaires in Hollywood. And I sarcastically replied, like, and all he had to do was set black people back 50 years to do it. And I was like, oh shit, that's like a good point of view. Because he responded like, okay, brother Malcolm. So, when I thought about Malcolm X as a character and how he would give someone grief, a successful black business person, I was thinking about that Lincoln Perry debate that I ended up having with a buddy of mine. And that actually, the debate between Sam and Malcolm was actually the first scene that I wrote in the play.
Excellent. And Florian, did you do anything else before you became a playwright?
Yes, I started writing as a novelist, actually. And one day, almost by accident, I discovered theater. And from that moment on, I became completely passionate about theater. The last 15 years, I mean, I was always every night in a theater working with actors, and it was really my passion. And The Father is my first feature film. It was before a play I wrote 8 years ago. And so the desire to write that screenplay is really connected to the desire to direct that film. And I think that the first image that I had about that film was more like a sensation connected with the stage experience. The fact is that when I wrote the script, when I wrote the play, I was not certain that the audience would be open to such an emotional journey. And I was really surprised and moved to discover the response of the audience, meaning that every night it was the same. People were waiting for us, not to say congratulations, but just to tell their own story, to share their own story. And I realized that there was something cathartic about it. And I think that's the moment that I made the decision to make a film. And precisely because the original idea of the play was to put the audience in a subjective position, and as if they were in the main character's head. And I thought that the cinema, thanks to its language, could turn this experience into an even more immersive experience.
Absolutely. So Emerald, Promising Young Woman is so incredibly effective, partly because you're playing with the audience. You're kind of subverting their expectations along the way. And I wondered how did you know what you could get away with and how far you could go in that way? Tell us what your process was there.
I don't know, honestly, is the answer. I don't know that you ever have a sense of what you can or can't get away with, but I think it really helped that I love the genres that this film plays on. So I really wanted to make a revenge thriller that felt like it had a real woman at the center of it. And what's so useful about that, and I suppose satirizing that, is that the story beats are so familiar to all of us. It's a journey that's so well plotted that means that we are in that kind of, as an audience, in that slightly lovely space of, oh, I know what's happening. Oh no, I don't. So I think it's just that kind of fun to be had there was that I suppose it softened everyone up so that they kind of, I suppose, weren't. Was it Houdini who got punched in the stomach because he wasn't ready? So I suppose that's the kind of sense you want with a film like this. You want to soften everyone up. You want them to feel safe and like they know what they're getting, like they know where they are, so that it's sort of too late by the time you.
So you actually created a mood board. Could you tell us what that was? Why you did that? For
Well, I
Cassie?
think for the whole film really, and a playlist too. I think it was partly that I was aware that when you're talking about anything serious, anything personal, that this film discusses obviously kind of very common form of sexual assault, and I think that there's still a very specific language for how we discuss serious things in film, and that tends to be, it tends to be very realistic and very somber, I suppose. And what I kind of wanted to show with the script, because it's so hard to give people a sense of tone. You can try in the stage directions, but I don't know about everyone else. I kind of hate stage directions. No one reads them. So I sort of feel like, if I sent this script, which seemed on the face of it quite dour and dark, I explained that the world needed to feel soft and feminine and poppy and comfortable, and the music was going to be Paris Hilton and Britney Spears. It really helped. It really helped with the reading of the script for people.
And did you use previews to help you see how the audience was responding?
Well, we didn't. We only had one. So we had one test screening, and I think the thing was, because we shot the film in such a short time, we didn't have an enormous amount of material. It wasn't, and it's a very kind of plot-driven film, and so it wasn't that thing that I hear in the edit of people refashioning a film. We had what we had just by the skin of our teeth, and so I don't even think, had we had a million test audiences, we'd have been able to change it, even if we wanted to. But yes, the only test screening we had, quite a loud fight broke out towards the end of the film during a kind of particularly sort of distressing scene. And so obviously my feeling, since it was my first film and my first test screening, was that it was never going to ever see the light of day, and the distributors would just pull it. But I think they understood that was quite a rare response, and probably a good thing, all considered.
So you weren't able to shift anything as a result of what you learned from how it played. You kept with what you had.
Well, I think the first answer is we couldn't have. That I don't know what we could have done except for sort of cut out, the last 15 minutes or something. But also I wouldn't have, because those decisions I really do feel are made in the writing. If you stay true to what you wanted in the script, it's not really. It's not up to you to be, it's not up to you to provide any particular response. I don't think. You just have to make the thing you want to make, and people can respond to it how they want to. I'm not
it
sure
worked out pretty well. All right. So thank you. Darius, would you explain a little more about how Derek Cianfrance helped you to develop this story over quite a long period of time, and what were the impediments to getting it made? Why was it so difficult?
Well, first of all, I just want to say how good it feels to be here with you guys. I was just like realizing as I was listening to you all, it's really like bringing me some, and it's been a really hard day today, and I was just realizing how good that felt to be here. So anyway, as far as this was a real handoff from Derek, actually, and once Derek, what I love so much about Derek as a filmmaker is he's really searching for a vein of life. He's really searching for something that is out of his control, that is, something surprising. And he had been shooting this doc without any script, that was kind of had a hybrid element to it. So it had a narrative element, but he was shooting it without a script. So I ended up cutting that. I was doing a lot of editing in those days. So I was working with that footage, which was beautiful and imbued with life, and so Derek, which is a good word. And I got inspired by it, and I ended up taking it over to write it when it was clear it would never make it. And I was just so lit up by this concept. I kind of stumbled across in the editorial process this idea of point of hearing, and this cinematic language that I hadn't seen before or heard before. And I just got inspired by it. But from the point I started writing, it was a real handoff. I just took it. And first of all, I don't know how the hell everyone else is making movies, but man, it's fucking hard. And I think part of it is, the industry isn't lit up. Like you say, I'm going to make a movie with the deaf community. The industry's not throwing money at you. There's like 3 actors on the planet that you can put in your movie that are going to finance your movie. And if it's your first movie and you're me, that ain't happening. So I was casting the movie for years, and I was so part of the reason it was so hard to make is because people are wimps. And part of the other reason it was so hard to make is because I wanted to make the movie the way I wanted to make the movie. And so I take some of that responsibility. I said no to various versions of the movie that could have been financed because they didn't feel exciting to me. And I had to kind of take it on the chin year after year. And it wasn't really until I met Riz that I felt like we had like this thing that was crazy enough to make this movie, because I really wanted the process to be dangerous. I wanted it to live on the edge. I wanted to play music in front of live audiences, and I wanted him to really actually physically go deaf, and I wanted him to learn sign language and music. How many actors are going to do that, I found out how many actors are going to do that. Actually. So, I think it was a balance of how difficult the industry is, and also I take some responsibility for it. I was wanting a process that was super crazy.
So the story is as much about addiction recovery as it is about hearing loss, and that helps to make it even richer.
Exactly. I actually, that took a long time to get to in the writing. I think my brother and I probably wrote 1,000 to 1,500, maybe 2,000 pages to get to the script we ended up with. We did a lot of writing, a lot of character, like rabbit holes and all sorts of things. And it took a while to get to the addiction. One thing I understood, and that was really something that I had to kind of search myself for, in the sense of that connection to a character that is really, thinking that he wants something and having to realize with an audience that it's not actually the journey. And that conceit I understood early. I just didn't know how to get to it, so it really was an interest in us getting to that. I wasn't interested in making a disability movie, I really wanted that other level and layer.
And you mentioned the sound design. I understand that it actually was written on the page.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is not the kind of movie you could do in post. It wouldn't work. I actually met this. We wrote so many pages of sound design. It's embarrassing. We really geeked out on it, and but it was really quite wonderful, honestly. The minutia of sound design. My brother's a bit of an audiophile, and he would just huddle over that and write this beautiful, glorious sound design forever. But this concept was always there, and I met my sound designer over a year before we started shooting, and we were building this sound design well before shooting, and it wouldn't have worked any other way.
Right. So Isaac, from the time Minari, and I have to, I'm going to do my best, Minari, it won both the audience and jury. Did I do better? Okay. It won both the audience and jury prizes at Sundance, and it's obviously played so well for audiences on all different platforms. But you had started with art films and small budget movies. How did you figure out how to make this personal story engaging and accessible to a wider audience?
Something that really helped me on this process was that I had to change who I thought my intended audience was. And I started to think a lot more about my own daughter and people in my own family. And I don't know, some of you might understand this, but a lot of my family have no patience for art. house films. And and I also thought, you know, if I make something for my daughter that is of that sort of genre, I mean, she's gonna watch it and think, "Gee, Dad, I guess this is interesting." But I wanted to like make something that would actually entertain her and keep her engaged, and that's what I kept my mind on with this film.
So you made the decision to tell the story from the point of view of a young boy. Why did you do that? And how did you figure out what the different points of view were during the story? How did that affect the structure of what you were doing?
Yeah, that balance kind of came out through the writing and the editing. I found I wanted it to kind of shift around and be from the perspective of both the boy and then also Jacob, the father. And that's where I started with the script, because I thought this is really a film that embodies like my perspective now as a husband and father, and also a child's perspective, which is kind of what I was thinking about my own child and about my own childhood. But as I was working and honing it down, I just found that it was always the child's perspective that was helping the film not sink under too much like self-seriousness. And really that child's perspective brings about a lot of forgiveness for what's going on with all the adults' lives. So I found that in the writing that helped a lot. And then once we got into the editing space, it was so true. Anytime that we went away from the little boy for too long, the film started to feel too top heavy or started to feel too gloomy. It was an interesting process to see, but that boy really anchors a certain tone to the film.
So when you brought in when you first conceived of the grandmother, did you write her as a kind of comic relief? Did you know that in advance, or was that changed by the casting of Yunya Jung?
I knew she needed to be funny. You know, this story is slightly based on my own life, and I was initially having an issue with wanting this family journey to start with all 5 family members. So it's the grandmother and the 2 parents and the 2 kids. And that more reflects what it was like for me as a kid to move to a farm in Arkansas. But I found that the story needed something to happen around the point that she does arrive. And I felt like that character, when she comes, she really needs to bring about this sudden burst of life. And humor had to be a part of that. But Yunya Jung, she's so funny. She's a comic actress, and she had so many great ideas that she wanted to. It's great when you write something funny. I'm sure a lot of people here know this. Like everybody ends up wanting to make it funnier, and that's just such a fun part of working on a film like this. And you know, she came up with the idea that the grandmother would steal the $100 from the offering plate at church. You know, there are little things that she added that I didn't come up with. But it was great that she ran with it.
Absolutely. So Aaron, you had all these different characters. You had these extraordinarily. You had all the transcripts. You had all the research that you did. I still marvel at how you threaded all these different time frames and characters together into something so engaging. And can you explain to us a little bit of your method in terms of I know you stalk around your house talking out loud and all the walking and pacing that you do, but this was a really a complicated puzzle that you put together, and I wondered how did you approach that?
Yeah, you know, after the research period, and like I said, I knew nothing, so there was a considerable amount of research to be done. All you're really prepared to do at that point is to do a dramatized Wikipedia page. You have to go through, at least I have to go through the climbing the walls a period, or stalking around my house, as you said, talking out loud. Then the film, I'll tell you, I need to give credit to someone, and it's Paul Greengrass. At one point, Paul Greengrass was thinking about directing the movie. Spielberg had decided that he should produce the movie and that there was a more appropriate director for it. So I was sent over to London to meet with Paul Greengrass. And we had dinner, and at the dinner there were some producers and executives. And at one point in the dinner, Paul just wanted to talk to me alone, so he asked me to go out on the sidewalk with him and have a cigarette. At which point he said, "Tell me the story." And I'm glad he did. That can be very helpful when you're writing something. If you try telling someone the story out loud, you'll sort of see where, well, if I have to go through this part, that's not solid yet. And you'll also see where, okay, obviously this part means a lot to me. Anyway, while telling him the story, I kind of casually referred to Hayden and Abby Hoffman, Tom Hayden and Abby Hoffman. I said, and there are these two guys who are like brothers. They're on the same side, except they plainly can't stand each other, and they each think that the other is doing harm to the cause. And he let me finish the, this oral recitation of what this story was. And then he just patted me on the shoulder, and as he walked back to the restaurant, he said, "Write about the brothers." So the film organized itself into three stories that I was going to tell at once: the courtroom drama, the evolution of the riot. How did what was supposed to be a peaceful protest evolve into such a violent clash with the police and law enforcement? And then finally, the personal story between Tom Hayden and Abby Hoffman, two guys on the same side who plainly can't stand each other, and they each think the other is doing harm to the cause. And so I told it that way. I think that with an event like the Chicago protests and the trial that followed, you could line up 10 screenwriters. We happen to have them here. Ask them all to write about the Chicago 7. You get 10 different movies, each of them perfectly valid.
Absolutely. So you often say that you try to find an intention and an obstacle and something standing in the way of someone getting it. How did that quest work in this screenplay?
Sure. Well, I don't want to take credit for intention and obstacle. That's Aristotle, who in the Poetics wrote the rules of drama in, I think, about 400 BC. The rules of drama are 4 centuries older than Christianity. And drama is intention and obstacle. Somebody wants something standing in their way of getting it. They want the money, they want the girl, they want to get to Philadelphia, and something formidable is standing in their way of getting it. Well, in this story, you don't have to look far for intention and obstacle. Whether it's the intention and obstacle in a courtroom are obvious. And one of the reasons I like courtroom dramas as a writer is that the parts of drama lay out perfectly in a courtroom. The stakes, the intention and obstacle, the fact that the jury knows as little as the audience does. And so you don't have to have clumsy exposition. There's a reason for the exposition. And the dynamic between a lawyer and a witness who's being cross-examined is inherently dramatic. But even outside the courtroom, every scene in the park is fundamentally about getting out of the park without getting clobbered by the police. So here you have this obstacle, 500 policemen with tear gas and clubs, and you have the intention, which is the Hilton Convention Center right over there.
Perfect. So Keith and Kenny, you guys were the ones who really did come up with the central conceit that turned Judas and the Black Messiah from a biopic into more of a genre story involving the FBI. And how did you come up with that?
Honestly, we were listening to MF Doom, Mad Villainy, and it's an album about coming from the perspective of the villain, and it just sort of dawned on us that we've never really had a civil rights biopic told from the perspective of someone who's like despicable, And we were like, we want to see that. We want to see his perspective. We want to, understand why he made the decisions he made. And I felt like that made for a more compelling crime thriller. Right. And we also thought, like, if you juxtapose Fred Hampton's story with Bill's story, it makes for, at least to us, a more compelling narrative. I mean, it's just so interesting to see just two people who are antithetical to one another, right, and to see that their story intertwined to create such a I don't know, I would say a profound narrative. Yeah, and I feel like you don't really get the complete story of Fred if you leave out Will's perspective or Bill's perspective, because Fred is a hero now in hindsight, but in the '60s he was vilified. He was a criminal. And I felt like if we're going to make a movie about Fred Hampton, we have to see him as the FBI and America saw him during that time, and that was as a criminal, a villain.
So how did you and Shaka meet up with Will Burson and combine those stories?
Yeah. So we were working with Shaka on a FX pilot that didn't go anywhere, and it wasn't our fault. It wasn't our fault. It could have been our fault. And but we hit it off with Shaka. He was so just calm and brilliant, and just a visionary. And we knew instantly, like, this is the guy who we're gonna need to work with to get our story made. So we went back to our apartment in Hollywood, again listening to Doom, and we just sort of like started talking about cinema for hours. And we realized that he had like a very strong foundation in '70s crime thrillers. He mentioned Sidney Lumet, and he was a big fan of The French Connection, and we were big fans of The Conformist. So it was just like we were just kind of vibing out over on film. And Will, while we were doing all that, was simultaneously developing his own screenplay about Fred Hampton. Mm-hmm. And we had a friend by the name of Jermaine Fowler. He's a stand-up comic. He was friends with Will Burson, also friends with us. So he connected us, and we had dinner, and then the rest is history.
So what was the practical way that you all combined forces just to come up with one screenplay? How did you do that?
So we worked with Shaka on developing the story outline, story treatment, and once Will came on board, he wrote the first vomit draft using the story that we developed with Shaka, and then Shaka and Will started to pass the script back and forth.
Excellent. So Peter, on the Borat subsequent movie film, you guys were dealing with can you hear that? All right.
It's not mine.
This is the leaf blower showing up on a day when he's never on duty. So basically, I'm assuming that you had to come up with various different outcomes for each of the scenarios that you were going to go out and try to achieve. And I wondered what the logistics of that actually were. Talk about that.
Well, the logistics are, with a movie like this, crazy. Because we did write, we write a screenplay for both the first movie and this movie. We write a very detailed screenplay, including dialogue that you hope people will say, because obviously these people, we have a cast who don't generally know they're in a movie, or don't at all know they're in a movie. And one of the issues really is that we have to write scenes. We write scenes, and we work as hard on those scenes as in any movie, but in the sure knowledge that there's at least a 50-50 chance that they won't even get filmed because things fall through at the last minute, or they don't work out. And I mean, we had a scene involving Rudolph Giuliani at the end of the movie that we just on a daily basis would go, what are we going to do when this doesn't happen? And then it just somehow miraculously came together, because I suppose not that surprisingly in retrospect, Rudolph Giuliani behaved as we expected him to behave. But so it's kind of a crazy process, but we do write.
Wrote it, right? That he did exactly what he did.
he kind of did. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of, I don't need to bore people here with the production logistics, which are obviously we've got an incredible production team and field team and research team and very brave people and very resourceful people who do their best to make these things possible. But like on any movie, you've got like, we're the writers sitting in a writer's room going, wouldn't this be amazing? Wouldn't this be powerful? Wouldn't this be hilarious? But we actually, Sasha had a table read at the beginning of early on in the process, and people came to this table read and and told us what they thought, and they said these scenes are fantastic. Who is going to play Rudolph Giuliani? Who's going to play this person? And you go, no, no, Rudolph Giuliani's going to play Rudolph Giuliani. But so we do have it's quite an involved process, but we do, we on the other hand we do write a movie, and obviously this movie was about a father from Kazakhstan coming with his daughter, with the abhorrent intention of delivering her, to be married to Rudolph Giuliani. And it was for that we studied, and we spent a lot of time studying, we write a screenplay, and we have, he wants to get her to, we've got obstacles and we've got goals and all that. We just have the extra problem of the real world interfering. Yeah.
So I have this. I have this image of you at the end of each day's shooting, sort of, this sort of war-torn, ragtag group of people reassembling at the hotel, and going over what you learned and how you have to change the script the next day. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think every hour we have that conversation. It's kind of crazy, but we really felt we wanted to do it, and we wanted to make the best movie, and we wanted to make a movie that was compelling and was interesting, was entertaining, because I think it's, we've got our views and we've got our political ideals, but you're not going to get anywhere by just hectoring people, and so we wanted to make people, we wanted to entertain people and make people laugh, and that's the medium that we chose to work in. But yeah, there are very real problems, because on a regular basis somebody will get wind of something, and then you've got to cancel the following day's filming. But we do, without wanting to spoil the magic and give away too much of our process, we do prepare and we do write it in a certain way, and Sasha / Borat behaves in a certain way that you hope a person speaking to you will play their part, so to speak. Yeah.
Was there something that you wrote in this movie that made its way all the way through that you are particularly proud of?
Oh my God. It becomes, because we rewrite so much, that just all the time, just constantly rewriting, including in the edit, it'd be hard to pin down anything specific, or I'll probably say something and then I'll immediately get a call from one of my co-writers saying, I wrote that. So it's, yeah. I feel a little bit on the spot.
You had the Giuliani thing, right? You had the Giuliani. The Giuliani thing did make its way all the way through, right?
It did make it all the way through, but me specifically, I don't know if I conceived the Giuliani thing, but I was very much part of every process, because it just is this organic thing. You're trying to make, get every individual scene over the finish line, and then obviously then you will shoot something, and so we had scenes in the movie, and in the first scene in within our world, not within other people's writing, and you then go, we can't use it. It doesn't work for the story. We've had lots of scenes like that where they just don't. They don't tell what you want to tell in that moment, or they don't serve the purpose of the story. I mean, that was a big jump for me personally when I first came out to work on the first Borat movie, was to go from writing comedy and writing half-hour comedies, where obviously a character in a sitcom, the rule is that they don't really change. They come back as the same character every week. And then to come into this world where it's almost universal that the character will go through some kind of change. Although with Borat, you have to be careful of the kind of change he goes through, because obviously he is this lovable, awful man that remains the way he is.
he fought, but also you had some women writers on the team, and you also
Yeah.
allowed for him to fall in love with his daughter, which was a pretty big change for him. Yeah.
Yeah. We still. I mean, we looked at a lot of classic movies like Fiddler on the Roof, and It Happened One Night, where you've got some kind of you've got an arc for both the character and in fact, It Happened One Night was more about the arc of Tutar, the daughter, and what the place she got to, where she got to a stage where she was going to have to give herself over, and then didn't go ahead with that, or the father came in and rescued her. But we looked at a lot of those things. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Chloe, you must be relating a little bit to what Peter went through, because you went through a version of this as well. I'm really curious about how you were able to conceive of the idea of how to turn this book into a movie, and the way that you decided to do it. How did it come to you that this was the solution for how to shoot this book?
It's nothing compared to what Peter went through. It's, us, it's just nice and peaceful sunsets. Can't compare. But I very much understand that kind of, it's an organism. When you make films that way, and when you give oxygen, it's just going to keep grow and change. And, as a writer, you're there to catch those sort of magnificent accidents that happen and making sure they still are part of the film. You don't really stop writing until the last day. But for me, when I was looking at Jessica's book, it really was a collage. She really went far and wide in capturing a time in this country. And so my challenge was to look at the collage and go, what is the heart of it? And for me personally, behind every word, every sentences, for me was the feeling of collective loss and grief for an entire generation of people, their way of life in this country, or what they believed was the dream, and that wasn't anymore. And so I wanted to create a fictional character that could tell that story in a very intimate and universal way that everyone can understand, at the same time have strong enough of emotional arc that can take us through this wonderful collage that Jessica had laid out in her book.
So did you go and figure out which characters you could bring with you from the book? You must have gone and met with them and before deciding how you would work them into the narrative.
Yes, I did. I definitely picked some folks from Jessica's book, and when you meet them, you put an iPhone or a camera on them. They either can do it or they can't. Because I won't be able to do it. I'll just keep looking at the camera, being extremely self-conscious. So the ones that really reacted well, like Swanky, immediately she told me the story about the swallow, and she showed me the video that you ended up seeing in the film. So I knew that had to be in the film. So Fern's character, played by Frances, had to change her arc so that this moment that we found in real life that's really magnificent can be included in the film. So she was really serving that moment. That's how we decided who is going to be in the film.
And did you do the same thing that Peter did in terms of having to rewrite every single night in order to do the next day's shooting? I mean, was it like that? Because you didn't know.
Like
how much did you know what you were going to get and what you weren't going to get? Where was there? Go ahead.
Again, I think it's just a very gentle version of what Peter and Dave went through. But every night in the lobby of a motel with KFC and tequila, we sat around and went, all right, so what are we going to do? This is what we got. The snowstorm came. So-and-so didn't show up. And then but there's Fern, right? She is just like Borat. Different characters, but they have something very unique about them that's consistent. So that can always be the anchor to help.
Thank you. So, Ramin, talk about your relationship with Aravind Adiga and how you came to make this movie so many years after you first met him.
Yeah, Arvind and I were friends in college in the 90s at Columbia University. There was a group of us, Iranians, Indians, Afghans, Lebanese, Syrians, that found one another and became friends. And I think we connected because he wanted to be a writer and I wanted to be a filmmaker. And most of the rest of them wanted to become engineers or doctors, which a lot of immigrants' parents want them to do. Um, but we wanted to do something different. And he says that our friendship really changed because I asked a bunch of guys one night to come watch this movie called Mean Streets, and I kept talking through the movie, trying to tell them like this is what this voiceover does, this is what this shot does, and everybody left except for him because it was why was I talking? And it was like it wasn't an action film or it didn't have a lot of sex in it, and everyone left. And he was amazed to understand or think that movies were something you could talk about and like think about. And I had never thought about that either until I was in high school and a teacher, our teacher started showing us movies, American films from the 70s. And of course, we thought it was going to be like, wow, we don't have to go to like do anything today. But then he started talking about them also. And that's when I started to realize you could think and talk about movies. And so it was the start of a 25-year friendship. And I started reading rough drafts of The White Tiger in 2004. I have them still saved in my laptop here. And, waited almost 15, 20 years to make the film.
So, was it Netflix that made it possible for a movie that was such a an epic collection of non-stars, set in India to be made? And did you would you have been able to do it the other way that you've been doing it for so long with Man Push Cart and Chop Shop and 99 Homes, which all they had great reviews and small audiences, but you this it's a little bit like Isaac. This was a much more relatable movie than a much more commercial movie, but in a way that wouldn't have been dictated by the specialty companies of Hollywood.
Yeah, that part is totally crazy for me. I think in 1 month the film was seen by 60 million people. They told me conservative estimate, which is totally
Whoa.
crazy to think about. Yeah,
Yeah, it
like
is.
I mean, coming from I was talking about Isaac, we were and even Chloe. We have your first films are so our films are pretty similar anyway, and people clap, but not a lot of people saw them, right? So that was totally nuts for me, and but amazing because I mean we developed it with Scott Stuber and Tendo and Sarah Bremner and Andrew Norman, Netflix, and I wanted to cast a new. They said yes. I mean the thing leads are stars. Raj Kumar Rao is a huge star in South Asia. Priyanka Chopra, Jonas, I think, is an international star. So that helped. I think it helped them as an unknown in the lead. But I think the global market is certainly changing. I mean, the Western market is going to it's shrinking. So different kinds of voices can be told now and have massive audience.
But how did you what did you do to change the book and make the movie a more it was pretty sprawling. I mean, you needed to pull
Yeah,
it into
yeah,
something tighter.
yeah. The first like 200 pages. Then later it got down to like 110. Yeah, it's a huge story. It had over 200 scenes, which I've written a script like that before. I'd only used voiceover once in a short film I did with Werner Herzog called Plastic Bag. So um, short scenes helped, and I restructured the novel in different ways. The opening is totally different in the film, and in the novel, he tells exactly what he does. The murder he commits has been being announced in the very beginning, and I changed it. and then it was just a constant compression. The hardest part was the tone, really, because the novel is kind of fun to read. There's something fun about it, and I don't know if my films are very fun, my other films. So this one movie was like, I would very, very seriously go to set every day and tell my creative team, we got to make it fun today. This has got to be a fun movie. And you know what helped with the actors? I liked my actors, and I don't like to go to the set and say we're filming this scene and I have a shot list. I like to just first make sure we're actually filming something that's worth filming good. And how can the actors surprise me, and what can they do? And I find in the scene that I've never thought of. So you're searching for that, and they enjoyed it. So they making it fun, and somehow at least the first half of the movie had that feeling. The second half was a little darker, and that navigating that shift in tone was tricky anyway. Yeah.
Very good. So Kemp, when you decided to adapt your play into a movie, was there pressure on you at all to make Cassius Clay the focus of that story? How did that you resisted?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the pressure came in writing the play itself, because my plays. I'm sure most people aren't familiar with my play. It had less than a dozen productions around the world. So, but in the original crafting of the play, I always wanted to center Sam Cooke and Malcolm X as the central conflict. And there's a certain kind of note you get in live theater. It's about like, I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but you get lots of notes about alienating the audience, and people are here to see Muhammad Ali. They're not here to see Malcolm X and a musician they've never heard of. So it was often these kinds of notes that I think were about the theater audience. And it was really easy for me to ignore those types of notes, because I always said from the very beginning, my goal in writing it as a play, it was at a very small 99-seat theater here in Los Angeles. But my goal when I wrote the play was to convince the folks across the street at Roscoe's to come see a play. So, I wasn't really thinking about the typical audience that came to the theater. I was thinking about my audience, which was basically myself at 20 years old, and what I would want to see when I was that age. And that was a story that I wanted to tell. But yeah, I definitely got a lot of notes along those lines. I think in many ways, it probably helped that I was a little bit older, and then a little bit more, certain about my convictions, because, it was a story that I wanted to tell.
Well, part of it was that you didn't see this story that you wanted to tell anywhere else, and you were going to have to create it, right?
Yeah, and I mean, isn't that always what it is? Like that, how many times have we sat in classes and had speakers say, if you don't see what you want out there, make it yourself. I guess I just took that shit literally, because I was like, all right, I want to write. I love theater. I grew up in New York, and I love Shakespeare. I love I love theater as much as anyone else. But I always saw, a lack of plays that represented people like me outside of August Wilson. Like once you get past August Wilson's cycle, there wasn't a lot growing up that I was exposed to. So, and for me, it was always about just this idea of exploring Black men's humanity, which is the one thing that I think was often missing when I saw representations of Black men in film and on stage. And sometimes we do it to ourselves. This idea of to me, superpowered and being superhuman and being inhuman are almost the same thing. When we make people superhuman, in many ways, we inadvertently strip away their humanity. And many of the icons and the people that I look up to, the more research that I did on them and studied, the things that most amazed me weren't their accomplishments. Things that amazed me were recollections from close friends about how like they were, to learn that Malcolm X was a shy man and had a dry wit and made everyone laugh. Like that's what blew me away. And so it was like making those kinds of discoveries. It made me feel closer to my heroes as opposed to further away. So, yeah.
So what kind of adjustments did you make with the movie itself?
The movie's very different. I mean, the play, the way it's structured, is basically it begins when the four of them enter the room. It's real time for 85 minutes, and it ends 85 minutes later when they walk out. So obviously, that's not a film. So I kind of stripped it down to the studs and started over. I wanted to retain thematically the story I wanted to tell, but it had to be a different story. The stage play definitely centers Sam Cooke way more than it does Malcolm. But Malcolm's story really became central to the film. I mean, when you talk about talky films, I'm similar to Aaron. I love courtroom dramas. My inspiration when I was writing this all along was 12 Angry Men. I love that. Was one of the first things that I saw. It was the first. I remember it being the first black and white movie that I liked when I was a kid. You know, like they play movies in class, and as soon as you see it's black, it's the 80s. You see it's black and white, you're like, fuck this. But like 12 Angry Men was like the first one that I was like, wow. Because, you know, you have this one guy systematically change the opinion of 11 other people and the audience at the same time. And I love the way they did that, how everyone spoke with such conviction and everyone was so convincing. And I was like, wow, I would love to see something tonally like that with black men, basically. It was as simple as that. I just wanted to see the stuff that I love starring us.
And just it totally works. So you ended up writing not one but two Oscar-nominated movies this year, and you ended up co-directing Soul with Pete Docter. So congratulations, you got to do an animated movie also.
There wasn't a lot of writing overlap, though. It was just production overlap. I actually finished the production draft of One Night in Miami like 4 days before I started on Soul back in 2018, because Pixar makes you move to Emeryville. So they were like, all right, once you start on this movie, you don't get to do anything else. So yeah, there was a little bit of production overlap, but for the most part, I was done with One Night in Miami when I started on Soul.
Very good.
That's amazing.
It really is. So Florian, why did you want to turn Le Pere into an English language film? And why did you choose
because I'm French.
Hampton to do it with?
I'm French. Yeah. And so the obvious decision would have been maybe to make the film in French. But to tell you the truth is because when I started dreaming about that film, because everything starts with a dream, the one and only face that came to my mind was Anthony Hopkins' face. So I had to do it in English because he can't do it in French. And I wrote the script with Christopher Hampton, who is a wonderful writer and a wonderful friend as well. And he has translated all my plays into English. So we already had this relationship and this friendship. And he was here to catch this British soul, which is not mine. And so to answer your question, it's only because I was dreaming about working with Anthony Hopkins, because to me, he's the greatest living actors. And also because I had that conviction that he would be special in that part. So I remember when I spoke with my friends about this idea, they were kindly laughing at me because he is Sir Anthony Hopkins, and it was my first feature film. I mean, I knew that it was not an easy dream to fulfill. But I thought, until someone comes and proves you that it is not possible, it means that potentially it is. And so I made the decision to follow my conviction and my desire. And so I tried to do it in English.
And you actually changed the name of the character from Andre to Anthony.
Yes, the main character's name is Anthony. At the very beginning, it was just... Sorry?
I said subtle. It's like a subtle hint that you want him.
No, it was to make that slightly unrealistic idea a bit more realistic, at least to me.
I love it. I love it.
But it was, I remember when we first met, he had many questions about my vision and what I wanted to make with that script. But he came several times on this name. He was like, "Are you certain that it's a good idea? Because it would be very easy to change the name, for something else." And to me, it was really meaningful to keep Anthony, because of course it was a way to play with the audience about, what is real, what is not real. But it was also a way, for us to go to some place, because I mean, I didn't come to him to ask him to do what he's known for or what we know he's good at. The challenge was to explore a new emotional territory, or to dare going to such a fragile and vulnerable place. And in a way, to make that happen, he had to be connected with his own fears and with his own feeling of mortality. So I think that to keep that name, Anthony, helps us to approach the territory.
So, how did the cinematic medium enhance your story when you moved it from the stage?
So of course it was a play, and what I didn't want to do was to film a play. I wanted to try to do something as cinematic as possible, and to do what the cinema can do, and what only the cinema can do. And so we kept with Chris Hampton the narrative of the play, which was to put the audience in an active position, trying to figure it out, trying to understand what was that labyrinth, as if the film was like a puzzle, and the audience had to play with all the pieces of that puzzle to try to make it meaningful. And because I wanted the father to be not only a story, but almost an experience, or the experience of what it could mean to lose everything, including your own bearings as a viewer. I wanted the audience to experience what it could mean to do not know anymore what is real and what is not real. But I tried to find a visual way to do what was not possible to do on stage, and the joyful challenge of the adaptation was to find a cinematic way to tell that story. And I remember when I started writing the script, I drew the layout of the apartment from the very beginning, as if it was one of the main characters of the story. And I immediately made the decision to shoot the whole film in a studio. As a filmmaker in a studio, you can do whatever you want. Of course, you can remove a wall, you can change the proportions, change the colors very easily. And I wanted to use all those possibilities to take the set as if it was a labyrinth, in order to play with that feeling of disorientation of the audience. And Darius, you just said that you had in your script so many pages of some design. And it was the same for me about the production design, everything was written, to change the walls, to change the proportions in order to create like a labyrinth. And this is what you did with the sound. It was a way to tell the story, or to create that subjective experience. And this is what we try to do through the set to create this experience of losing your own bearings.
Amazing.
Want to do next before we wrap up is just talk a little bit about why it's so hard to write original screenplays in Hollywood. What are the reasons why it's difficult, and is it changing? Is it getting better? Is the industry becoming more receptive to more daring ideas? And anyone can pop in on this one. We don't have to go all the way around the horn again.
And you mean, why is it hard to write them, or why is it hard to get them made?
To get them made.
Oh. I would think that it's because a studio is more comfortable with well-known IP. Probably, they're going to be more comfortable with a movie based on a best-selling book or a comic book character, right?
Yep.
That's what I think. We can. Curious to hear from the rest
The whole.
of you.
I think the whole industry is. I think the whole concept of making movies is that crazy balance of control versus. You have so much at stake with money and everything that everyone looks for a controlled process. So they try to say it's like Pinocchio meets Gone with the Wind meets, and there's always that kind of cliche about Hollywood. But I have to say that this is a game changer of a year. I mean, I think that this is what's so extraordinary. Like, I'm really enjoying sitting here with you guys because I'm just thinking, man, this is an unusual year, not just for COVID, but for the fact that this is a different look. This is a different look at a lot of films, and I'd like to think it's shifting. I'd like to think that Hollywood is maybe starting to understand that bravery isn't craziness. Actually, sometimes control is crazy. In fact, sometimes trying to wag the dog is pure insanity. So I'm seeing a group of filmmakers that all stepped out, and it's kind of amazing. So I don't know, maybe it is shifting.
I also think it's the year of the screenplay. I really do. The screenplays represented here in this Zoom call are fantastic. I'll excuse myself from that adjective, but the other 9 screenplays were fantastic.
It's pretty amazing to get compliment from Aaron Sorkins, I have to say.
Yeah,
Isn't to be thanked by Chloe Zhao.
Well,
it's just the originality and all the movies here. It's like it's a bit scary and intimidating to be with all new people, because it's like there's so many. All these movies are fantastic, and I mean, I think in the end it's like that. The thing when they'll say, I keep being told, like sometimes an agent will say something like, "This is what they're looking for this year. This is what they're looking for." And the thing is, whatever people are looking for is never what comes out. Whatever rises to the top, it's always originality and the films that are all like just surprising, and you just think that's an amazing idea. I wish I thought of it.
I think that's absolutely true, and I think that these are the most extraordinary screenplays. And I want to thank you all for being part of this wonderful conversation. I would have loved to have seen you in person, shoulder to shoulder, all on one dais, but this is what we had to do today, and it went pretty well, I think. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Such an honor.
Great. See you on the 25th.